are the things that, actual pitfalls or things to be worried about, concerns, challenges regarding BRMS? What's a major worry? Connie, what's your sense? What would you tell people about that?
I think a major concern I've already raised, which is just extreme complexity. And I realize there are some processes that are just flat out complex because of regulatory requirements, especially in insurance where you have every state with different legalities and so forth. But overcomplicating it will really hurt adoption, slow the projects down, turn them into very costly, expensive things. So I think a good way to
overcomplicating the user interface, you mean?
The user interface, the everything, the deployment. Oh, you mean the complexity of the product? I mean the back end and the user interface. And I think one way to do this is to take inventory of the kinds of processes you have and what are their characteristics, and then do a matching process, because it may not be one single business rules engine is the total solution for the entire enterprise. It may be more horses for courses, where a certain kind of process maps to a certain type of product. And I think that that's the kind of thinking I would do in order to save a lot of money and save a lot of time and a lot of aggravation.
It seems like any product that asks IT folks and business folks to work closely together could have some built-in challenges to begin with. Edgar, what's your take on things to be concerned about with BRMS solutions?
Sure. I think there are a couple things. I completely agree from a business IT standpoint that you're talking about user friendliness, right? But I also think that the whole notion of you need to figure out who the intended user actually is. We do talk about business IT collaboration. Oftentimes what happens is, even though you've bought a tool thinking that your business people are going to use it, businesses sort of revolt because they don't want to take on the ownership. They don't want to take on that liability. It's always easier to blame things on IT if things go wrong, rather than take that ownership, right? So when we're talking about that collaboration, we have to figure out who that intended user is. And from a user friendliness aspect, if there's any chance that you do want your business people to use it, you have to look at a tool which is friendly for the business people. Not just from a UI aspect, but from an aspect that you're not asking the business people to learn any kind of a proprietary language, right? It's so intuitive in the sense that without having to learn any kind of technology, you can start using the tool. The other thing I think was mentioned was one platform agnostic, right? But the whole notion that Connie brought up is from an enterprise standpoint, you need to figure out whether you're looking at a rules engine for a very small project that you have in mind, or you're looking to build like an enterprise-wide decisioning strategy, where as a company you're saying, look, all my business logic is going to reside in rule engines. And the needs for each product might be different. And I think the last piece, I think that is a big risk that I see oftentimes is when you're looking at products, when you're looking at different tools, companies typically tend to give you a very superficial, very simple demo of the product that blows everything out of the water just because they're using very simple rules and they know what the pitfalls of the product are. I would force the customers and the prospects to push back on those demos and say, no, I want a really complex use case with hierarchical data associations, really complex logic, because you never know how complex the product is going to be to use when you're actually in a real live practical scenario.
So in other words, you would ask the salesperson to use variables of the real company they're pitching to?
Absolutely, and that's what we call as a proof of concept. Right? You go down, you say, well, I need to build a POC, a proof of concept. Here's a sample of my most complex logic that I have in my company. Show me how your product works with that. So it's a big investment, and you don't want to go easy on any software vendor and take their word of mouth, right? You want to test them before making that investment. you don't want to be in a position 2 years down the line where you're actually suing a vendor, for example, that your product doesn't work and it's not, I'm out $1 million and I'm still nowhere close to where I was supposed to be.
Right. Dana, what do you think some potential pitfalls or challenges are for a BRMS solution?
Right. I think you want to perhaps be careful that you're dealing with a vendor where the rules engine is very ancillary to their main business, as an afterthought, and is therefore not very well engineered or sophisticated. You want to look for a vendor where the rules engine is a primary product line, is an important part of their overall business and success. And with that, you would probably see a well-engineered, well-thought-out product that is advancing beyond just a standalone repository and becoming more like what we saw with software, where it becomes more object-oriented, modular, where patterns of reuse, where services orientation are brought to bear, and where sophistication and scale are part of the top requirements, so that you can either use it on a project basis or extend it to be an enterprise-wide solution. So you want to look for a well-engineered product from a vendor that looks at this product line as an essential part of its growth and success, and that actually allows for patterns of reuse, modular definition of what a good rules snippet or flow is, and how you can then extend that and reuse it. And that helps on that whole issue about users, business users, becoming more adept at this, rather than starting from scratch every time they want to create a flow. They've got something that's already well developed that they can start from and improve upon.
Mm-hmm.
And James, I think that's a bit of a complication. It just is what it is. But often business rules software is embedded in something bigger. And so then you get into you're picking out the whole, but the parts are very important too. And I think that can just become a complicating factor. You can also buy business rules engines directly and then have someone or yourself integrate them into something bigger. But I'm not sure what percentage of BREs are sold as part of something else, but I bet it's pretty high.
Are you recommending a standalone or not standalone, or that's not the point?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that, we've been talking about selecting and matching to your requirements and so forth, but the question becomes, what are you buying and how is it packaged? Because if you perceive that you're buying, I'm sorry, I keep using business process, but that's my bag. If you perceive you're buying a complex, advanced business process management suite, and business rules is actually a very important piece of that suite, but you may not realize it because it's one of many things, what becomes the more important thing? Where do you really drill in and make sure it matches your requirement? I mean, it could be that the whole thing matches your requirement and the business rules engine matches your requirement and everything is great. Or it could be something suboptimal, and what do you suboptimize on, for example? I just think it's a little bit complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I just quickly say I agree with Connie. It is a little bit complicated, and if you really think about it, rule engines, right, or business logic doesn't exist in a silo. It's always part of a process. It's always part of this big stack of IT systems that a company has. And no one really wakes up in the morning saying, hey, I need to buy a rules engine. Yeah. They have a problem and they wake up trying to solve that problem. And one way could be that you buy these separate components and try to work them in, which is where you will look for a standalone rules engine. The other way is you look at either companies or software vendors that have this big solution suite. And in most cases that we've seen, rules engine as a component is just there so that they can take a checkbox, right? If the question comes in, hey, what do we do about rules? We can say, look, we have something. It might not be as sophisticated. It might not be as user-friendly, but at least we have it. So I think there's two ways. Either you buy these components separately, which are designed for that specific functionality, or you're looking at a complete solution suite where everything is a small component but not all of those things are the focus for a company.
So it sounds like the complexity of that complete solution suite creates a lot of questions that may be more difficult to answer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.